The stars had always been silent. For thousands of years, humanity had looked up at the night sky and wondered if they were alone. They sent radio signals into the darkness. They built telescopes and satellites. They dreamed of the day when they would finally meet another intelligent species. On the morning of June 14th, 2147, they got their answer. The ships came out of nowhere. One moment the sky was clear and blue, and the next moment it was filled with darkness. Thousands of vessels, each one larger than any city on Earth, blocked out the sun across every continent. They hung in the air like mountains made of metal, silent and terrible. The world stopped. Cars crashed on highways as drivers stared upward. Children pointed at the sky while their parents stood frozen in fear. Governments tried to make contact, but their signals went unanswered. For 3 hours, humanity could do nothing but wait and watch. Then the message came. Every screen on Earth flickered to life at the same time. Televisions, phones, computers, billboards, all of them showed the same image. A creature sat on a throne made of bone and gold. It had 4 eyes, arranged in a diamond pattern across a face that was almost human but not quite. Its skin was pale gray, and when it spoke, its voice was calm and cold. "I am High Admiral or of the Dominion," the creature said. "Your world has been chosen for integration into our empire. We have conquered 11,000 worlds across this galaxy. Some of those worlds chose to resist us. They no longer exist. Others chose wisdom. They serve us now, and their people live in peace." The High Admiral leaned forward, and his 4 eyes seemed to look at every human being at once. "We offer you mercy. This is something we rarely do. You are young, you are weak. You have barely left your own planet. You are not worth the effort of destruction, so we give you a choice. Kneel before the Dominion and you will be allowed to live as servants. Your world will be preserved. Your children will grow up in safety. Refuse, and we will cleanse this planet of all life. You have 1 solar cycle to decide." The screens went dark. For the next hour the world was chaos. People ran through the streets. Some prayed. Some screamed. Some simply sat down and cried. The leaders of every nation gathered in emergency meetings, trying to figure out what to do. The military experts gave their reports, and the news was grim. Earth had a small fleet of ships, about 50 vessels designed for exploration and light defense. They had thousands of warships, each one carrying weapons that humanity could not even understand. A fight would last perhaps 6 hours, maybe less. "We have no choice," said the president of the European Federation. "If we resist, we die, all of us, every man, woman, and child on this planet." "Survival is what matters," said the Chinese premier. "We can survive as servants. We cannot survive as corpses." The debate went on for hours. Most of the leaders agreed that surrender was the only logical option. They would kneel. They would serve. Their children would live even if they lived as slaves. But then something strange began to happen. It started in small places. A teenage girl in Brazil painted 3 words on a wall: "We do not kneel." A factory worker in Germany hung a banner from his window with the same message. An old woman in Japan stood in the street and shouted the words until her voice gave out. Within hours, the message was everywhere. It spread through social media faster than any virus. It was written in every language, but the meaning was always the same. We do not kneel. People who had never met each other, who lived on opposite sides of the world, who spoke different languages and believed in different gods, all of them said the same thing. The leaders watched this happen with growing horror. "This is madness," said the British Prime Minister. "These people are choosing death. They are choosing the extinction of our entire species." But the American president shook her head slowly. "No," she said, "they are choosing something else. They are choosing to remain human." She stood up and looked at the other leaders. "I will not force my people to kneel. I will not tell them that survival is more important than dignity. If they want to fight, then we will fight. And if we die, then at least we die standing." One by one, the other leaders made their choice. Some chose surrender. Their governments fell within hours, overthrown by their own citizens. Others chose resistance. They began preparing for a war they could not win. In his great ship above the earth, High Admiral Or watched these events with interest. He had seen this before, of course. Every species fought at first. It was natural. It was instinct. But they always broke in the end. They always realized that survival was more important than pride. His second-in-command, a young officer named Haz, stood beside him. "The humans are preparing to fight," Haz said. "They are moving military forces into position. They are building fortifications." "Let them," Or said. "It will make no difference. They have nothing that can hurt us." "Should we attack now, High Admiral?" Or considered this for a moment. Then he shook his head. "No, let them have their day of preparation. Let them think they have a chance. When we destroy them, the lesson will be even more powerful. The other species in this sector will see what happens to those who defy the Dominion." He turned away from the viewing screen and walked toward his chambers. "Wake me when the solar cycle is complete. Then we will show these humans the price of their foolishness." But as he walked away, something nagged at the back of his mind. He had conquered 11,000 worlds. He had broken 100 different species. He knew what resistance looked like. This felt different. He pushed the thought aside. Humans were primitive, weak. They had no technology, no fleet, no experience with galactic warfare. They were nothing but animals with dreams of greatness. In a few days, they would be nothing at all. He was wrong. He was so terribly, wonderfully wrong. But he would not understand that for many weeks yet. For now, he slept peacefully while below him, humanity prepared for war. They knew they could not win. They knew they would probably die. But they also knew something that they had never understood about them. Humans were not afraid of death. They were afraid of living without meaning. They were afraid of looking in the mirror and seeing a coward. They were afraid of telling their children that they had given up without a fight. So they built their weapons. They wrote letters to their loved ones. They said their prayers and made their peace with whatever gods they believed in. And they waited for the storm to come. The first soldiers landed on Earth at exactly midnight Greenwich Mean Time. They expected the operation to last 6 hours. Their commanders had already written the victory reports. Their soldiers were laughing and joking as their transport ships descended through the clouds. They stopped laughing very quickly. They landed in 12 major cities at the same time: New York, Beijing, Moscow, London, Tokyo, Mumbai, Cairo, Sydney, Berlin, Lagos, and Mexico City. 10,000 soldiers in each city. 120,000 troops in total. More than enough to crush any resistance. In New York, the commander led his forces down Fifth Avenue. The streets were empty. The buildings were dark. It looked like the humans had already fled. Then the first shot rang out. The commander fell, a hole burned through his chest by a weapon that should not have been able to pierce armor. Before his body hit the ground, 1,000 more shots followed. They came from windows, from rooftops, from sewers, from everywhere at once. Humans poured out of hiding places that they had not even known existed. They attacked with rifles and rockets and grenades. They attacked with knives and clubs and bare hands. They attacked with a fury that they had never seen in any species before. Within the first hour, 3,000 soldiers were dead. High Admiral Or received the reports with confusion. This was impossible. Human weapons were primitive. Human soldiers were untrained. This should have been a simple cleanup operation. He sent more troops, 10,000 more in each city, then 20,000 more, then 50,000. The humans kept fighting. A general named Maria Santos commanded the defense of the city. She had only 300 soldiers under her command. They had more than 10,000. By any reasonable calculation, her forces should have been destroyed in minutes. Instead, the battle lasted 19 days. Santos turned every building into a fortress. Every street became a trap. Every shadow held a sniper. She knew the city like she knew her own heartbeat, and she used that knowledge to kill by the hundreds. When her ammunition ran out, her soldiers used captured weapons. When those ran out, they used knives and machetes. When those broke, they used their hands. On the 19th day, Santos found herself alone in a basement beneath the ruins of a hospital. All of her soldiers were dead. She was wounded in 3 places and could barely stand. Outside, she could hear the calling for her to surrender. She opened a channel to the Global Resistance Network. Her voice was weak but clear. "This is General Santos," she said. "I have killed 1,047 of them. My soldiers killed many more. Tell the world that did not fall easily. Tell them we made the enemy bleed for every block, every building, every room." Then she pressed the button that activated the fusion reactor beneath the hospital. The explosion killed Santos. It also killed 4,000 soldiers who had gathered around her position. Stories like this happened everywhere. In every city, in every country, humans fought and died and made the pay for every meter of ground. In the Pacific Ocean, a naval captain named commanded a destroyer that was older than she was. Her ship had been hit 17 times by weapons. Half her crew was dead. Her engines were failing. Her weapons were destroyed. A dreadnought hung in the sky above her, preparing to deliver the final blow. Looked at what remained of her crew, young men and women who had followed her into an impossible battle. They were wounded, exhausted, and terrified, but they were still standing at their posts. "We cannot run," said quietly, "and we cannot fight, so there is only one thing left to do." She gave orders to redirect all remaining power to the engines. The ship lurched forward, picking up speed, heading directly toward the dreadnought. They tried to move, but they were too slow. The destroyer hit the dreadnought at full speed, tearing through its hull and detonating its power core. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire that could be seen from space. 4,000 died. 112 humans died. Among those humans was Captain, whose last transmission was a single word: remember. The galaxy would remember, but that would come later. For now, the war continued. Day after day, week after week, the pushed forward and the humans pushed back. Cities fell, but slowly. Regions were conquered, but at terrible cost. By the end of the first month, they had lost 500,000 soldiers. 500,000 warriors, dead on a planet that should have been conquered in a single day. High Admiral or could not understand it. He had fought 100 wars. He had conquered species far more advanced than humanity. None of them had resisted like this. "What are they?" he asked his advisors. "What drives them to fight so hard when they know they cannot win?" No one had an answer. The humans had an answer, though they never spoke it aloud. They fought because they were human. They fought because their ancestors had fought. They fought because somewhere in their blood, in their bones, in the deepest parts of their souls, there was something that refused to submit. They could not defeat them. They knew this. Every general, every soldier, every civilian with a weapon knew that victory was impossible. But they could make the hurt. They could make them bleed. They could make them pay such a price that even victory would taste like ashes in their mouths. And so they fought on, day after day, week after week, dying by the millions but taking the enemy with them. The war that should have lasted hours stretched into weeks. The conquest that should have cost thousands became a slaughter that claimed millions on both sides. And in the darkness between the stars, other species began to hear rumors. Whispers about a small blue planet that had dared to fight back. Stories about creatures called humans who did not know how to surrender. For the first time in 1,000 years, the word spread through the conquered worlds of the Dominion. Someone was fighting. Someone was making them bleed. And slowly, in 1,000,000 hearts across 1,000 worlds, something that had been dead for generations began to stir. Hope. By the 40th day of the war, something had changed in the army. The soldiers no longer laughed before battle. They no longer joked about how easy this conquest would be. Instead, they checked their weapons 3 times before leaving their ships. They looked over their shoulders constantly. They jumped at sudden sounds. They were afraid. A commander named R noticed this change in his troops. He had fought in 47 campaigns across the galaxy. He had seen soldiers grow tired, grow frustrated, grow angry. But he had never seen them grow afraid. Not like this. His mission was simple: capture a human fortress built into a mountain in the region called Switzerland. Intelligence reports said the fortress held perhaps 200 defenders. R had 5,000 soldiers under his command. The battle should have taken 1 hour. It took 12 days. The humans had turned the mountain into a maze of tunnels and traps. Every corridor was rigged with explosives. Every doorway was a kill zone. R's soldiers advanced meter by meter, and every meter cost them lives. On the 3rd day, R sent a message to the defenders, offering them a chance to surrender with honor. He promised they would be treated well as prisoners. The response came in the form of a rocket that killed 12 of his officers. On the 7th day, R tried a different approach. He sealed all the entrances to the mountain and cut off the air supply. Surely the humans would surrender rather than suffocate. Instead, they dug new tunnels through the rock with their bare hands and launched a surprise attack that killed another 100 soldiers. On the 10th day, R began using heavy weapons to collapse the tunnels one by one. The mountain shook with explosions. Entire sections caved in, burying defenders alive. Still, the humans fought on. By the 12th day, R finally reached the inner chambers of the fortress. His army of 5,000 had been reduced to less than 3,000. His officers were dead. His soldiers were exhausted and terrified. Inside the final chamber, he found a single human. She was a woman named. She wore the uniform of a military officer, though it was torn and covered in blood. She had been wounded many times. Her left arm hung uselessly at her side. A deep cut ran across her face, barely missing her eye. She was surrounded by the bodies of soldiers, at least 30 of them. She had killed them all with nothing but a knife and her own determination. And she was smiling. R stared at her, trying to understand what he was seeing. She was dying. She had to know she was dying. There was no hope of rescue, no chance of escape. She had lost. So why was she smiling? "Do you know what you have done?" R demanded. His voice echoed in the bloody chamber. "You have accomplished nothing. You have only delayed the inevitable. Your fortress has fallen. Your people are dead. Your species will soon be extinct." Looked up at him. Her eyes were bright with pain and something else, something that looked almost like triumph. "You still do not understand," she said. Her voice was a whisper, but R heard every word. "We were never trying to win." R stepped closer. "Then why fight? Why die? Why sacrifice everything for nothing?" Smile grew wider. "Because we wanted to make sure you never forget. 1,000 years from now, your children's children will tell stories about this world. They will remember the humans. They will remember how we made you bleed. They will remember that the mighty Dominion came to a small blue planet and found something they could not break." She lifted her right hand. R saw the device in her palm too late. "We do not kneel," whispered. Then she pressed the button. The explosion destroyed the entire chamber. It killed R. It killed every officer who had been foolish enough to follow their commander into the heart of the mountain. When rescue teams arrived hours later, they found nothing but rubble and bodies. Among the dead was the highest-ranking commander on the European front. The story of what happened spread through the army within hours. Soldiers who had not been there told the tale to soldiers who had not heard it. Each time the story grew, became something more than a single wounded woman. She became a symbol, a nightmare. That night, soldiers across the planet had trouble sleeping. They saw human faces in the shadows. They heard human voices in the wind. They dreamed of small, fragile creatures who smiled as they died and took their enemies with them. High Admiral or received the reports with growing concern. His army was winning every battle but losing something far more important. His soldiers were breaking, not their bodies, their spirits. He called his senior officers together for a private meeting. "I have fought 100 wars," or said slowly. "I have conquered species with armies 10 times the size of ours. I have faced enemies with weapons that could crack planets in half. None of them frightened my soldiers." He looked around the room at the faces of his commanders. He saw what he had feared. They were afraid too. "These humans are weak," or continued. "They are primitive. Their weapons are toys compared to ours, and yet my army trembles at the thought of facing them. Why?" One of his officers, an old veteran named, spoke quietly. "Because they do not fear death, High Admiral. Every species we have conquered clung to life. They fought hard, yes, but when they saw they could not win, they surrendered. They chose survival over pride." Shook his head slowly. "The humans do not make that choice. They fight harder when they know they are going to die. They smile as they fall. They turn their own deaths into weapons. We have never faced anything like them." Or was silent for a long time. "What do you suggest?" he finally asked. Met his eyes. "I suggest we consider whether this conquest is worth the cost. We can destroy them. We have the power, but our soldiers will never be the same. The memory of this war will haunt them forever." Or dismissed his officers and stood alone in his command chamber, staring down at the burning planet below. For the first time in his long career, he did not know what to do. On the 63rd day of the war, High Admiral or did something that no commander had ever done before. He asked to speak with his enemy. Finding someone to speak with was not easy. Earth's governments had been destroyed weeks ago. Most of the world's leaders were dead. The survivors were scattered across the planet, hiding in bunkers and caves and ruins, coordinating what remained of the resistance. Eventually, Or's communications officers found a signal coming from somewhere beneath the Rocky Mountains. A group of humans had built a command center deep underground, protected by miles of solid rock. They were still giving orders to resistance cells around the world. The leader of this group was a man named James. He had been a diplomat before the war, representing his country at the United Nations. Now he was one of the last remaining members of something called the United Earth Council, a government that no longer existed for a planet that was dying. Was 67 years old. He was thin and tired and sick. The radiation from the nuclear weapons that both sides had used was slowly killing him. He had maybe a few months left to live. When Or's face appeared on his screen, did not seem surprised. "High Admiral," he said. His voice was calm and steady. "I wondered when you would call." Or studied the human carefully. He saw the signs of illness, the gray skin and hollow cheeks. He saw the weariness in the man's eyes. But he also saw something else, something hard and bright that refused to die. "You have lost," Or said. "Your armies are destroyed. Your cities are rubble. Your population has been reduced by more than half. What purpose does continued resistance serve?" Smiled slightly. It was not a happy smile. "We stopped fighting for survival weeks ago," he said. "When we realized that we could not win, we accepted that our species might end. It was painful, but we made our peace with it." "Then why continue?" Or asked. He genuinely wanted to understand. Why throw away more lives for nothing? "For nothing," shook his head slowly. "No, High Admiral, we are not fighting for nothing. We are fighting for something more important than our own survival." He leaned forward, and despite his illness, his eyes burned with intensity. "We are fighting for memory. We are fighting so that every species in your dominion will hear our story. We are fighting so that 1,000 years from now, When some young civilization looks up and sees warships in their sky, they will remember that once, a small blue planet made the mighty Dominion bleed. Spread his hands. You can kill us. You probably will, but you cannot kill what we have become. We are no longer just a species fighting for territory. We are an idea. We are proof that your empire can be hurt, and ideas, High Admiral, are very hard to destroy. Or was silent for a long moment. You are willing to die, he said slowly, just so that other species might remember you. We are willing to die, corrected, so that other species might be inspired, so that the next world you threaten might choose to fight instead of kneel, so that someday, somewhere, a species will rise that can do what we could not, defeat you completely. He smiled again, and this time there was something almost peaceful in his expression. We are planting seeds, High Admiral. We will never see them grow, but knowing that they might, that is enough. That is more than enough. Or ended the communication, and sat alone in the darkness of his command chamber. He thought about his army, 2 million soldiers dead, 2 million warriors who had expected an easy victory, now buried in the soil of this strange little planet. His remaining troops were broken in spirit. They flinched at shadows. They cried out in their sleep. He thought about his empire. The Dominion stretched across 1,000 star systems. It had endured for 10,000 years. It had conquered 11,000 worlds. It was the greatest power in the galaxy. And yet this one small planet, with its primitive technology and fragile soldiers, had done more damage than any enemy in living memory. He thought about the future. If he destroyed humanity completely, they would become martyrs. The story would spread. Other species would hear how the humans chose death over submission. Some of them might be inspired to resist. But if he let the humans live, if he simply left, the message would be even more dangerous. The galaxy would learn that there was a species that had chosen not to fight. Either way, the Dominion lost. Or called his officers together one final time. We are withdrawing, he said. The room erupted in shock. Officers shouted questions. Some protested that they could still win. Others demanded to know if this was a joke. Or waited until they fell silent. We can destroy them, he said quietly. I do not doubt this, but the cost is too high. Not in soldiers, we have soldiers to spare. The cost is in what this war is doing to our people. Our troops are afraid. They have nightmares about human faces. They jump at every sound. He looked around the room. We have conquered 11,000 worlds. Not one of them has ever made our soldiers afraid. If we continue this war, we will win the battle but lose something far more important. We will lose the belief that we cannot be hurt. He stood and walked to the viewing screen, looking down at the ruined planet below. Earth is no longer worth conquering. The humans have made sure of that. They have turned their world into a symbol of resistance. If we destroy them, that symbol only grows stronger. If we conquer them, our soldiers will remember their fear forever. He turned to face his officers. So we leave. We declare this world forbidden. We return to the Dominion and speak of this war to no one. The humans will be forgotten. In a few generations, no one will remember they ever existed. One of his younger officers stepped forward. High Admiral, with respect, the other species in the Dominion will learn of this. They will see that we retreated. They will think we are weak. Or nodded slowly. Yes, they might. And that is a risk we must accept, because the alternative is worse. The alternative is an army that has learned to fear. He gave the order. Within hours, the fleet began to rise from Earth's surface. Millions of soldiers were transported back to their ships. Weapons were collected. Bases were abandoned. The occupation was ended. On the 71st day of the war, the last ship left Earth's orbit. Below, in their bunkers and caves and ruins, the surviving humans watched them go. They did not cheer. They did not celebrate. They were too tired, too wounded, too aware of everything they had lost. But they had survived. Against all odds, against the greatest military power in the galaxy, they had survived. James died 3 weeks later from radiation sickness. His last words were spoken to a nurse who barely knew him. "Tell them," he whispered, "tell them we did not kneel." She told everyone she met for the rest of her life. They tried to bury the truth. When High Admiral or returned to the Dominion, he delivered his report to the Eternal Council in private. No records were made. No announcements were given. Earth was simply declared forbidden, a quarantine zone that no ship would ever visit again. The soldiers who had fought on Earth were scattered across the Empire. They were transferred to distant outposts, assigned to quiet duties, kept far away from each other. They were ordered never to speak of what they had seen. For a while it worked. The galaxy continued as it always had. The Dominion conquered new worlds. New species knelt before warships. Everything seemed normal. But secrets have a way of escaping. The first whispers came from taverns and trading posts on the edge of space. Merchants heard stories from soldiers who had drunk too much and talked too freely. A planet that had fought back. A species that had refused to kneel. Creatures called humans who smiled as they died. Most people did not believe these stories. They sounded like fairy tales, like legends invented to frighten children. The Dominion was invincible. Everyone knew this. No primitive species could possibly challenge them. But the stories kept spreading. 50 years after the war, a trader named In published a book. He had spent decades collecting stories about Earth from retired soldiers, from merchants who had been near the planet during the war, from anyone who would talk to him. His book was banned immediately by authorities. Within a year, it was the most widely read book in the galaxy. People it by hand. They memorized chapters and recited them to friends. They translated it into hundreds of languages. The more the Dominion tried to suppress it, the faster it spread. The book told stories that made readers weep. General Santos and her 19 days in, Captain and her final ramming attack, and her smile in the darkness. 100 other heroes whose names had almost been lost. But more than the individual stories, the book contained an idea that had been dormant in the hearts of conquered species for thousands of years. Resistance was possible. The mighty could be hurt. Someone had proven it. 100 years after the war, the first rebellion began. A species called the conquered 800 years earlier rose up against their masters. They were crushed within months, but before they fell, their leaders sent out a message to every corner of the galaxy. The message showed a symbol, a small blue circle representing Earth, surrounded by the words "We do not kneel." Other rebellions followed. Some lasted days, some lasted years. All of them were eventually defeated, but each one spread the legend further. Each one added new believers to the cause. 200 years after the war, the Dominion began to crack. It started with small things: supply lines that were sabotaged, governors who were assassinated, ships that disappeared without a trace. The Dominion was too large, too stretched, too dependent on fear to maintain its control. And the fear was gone. Species that had once trembled at the sight of warships now looked at them with different eyes. They remembered the stories. They remembered the humans. They told themselves that if a primitive species on a small blue planet could make the Dominion bleed, perhaps they could too. The final collapse took 50 years. System by system, the empire fell apart. Former slaves became free people. Former subjects became independent nations. They themselves retreated to their home worlds, shadows of their former glory. When it was over, the liberated species built monuments across 1,000 worlds, not to themselves, to the humans. Statues of Maria Santos stood in plaza centers. Ships were named after. Schools taught the story of to every child. And on the anniversary of Earth's victory, people across the galaxy would gather together and speak 3 words in a language that most of them had never learned. We do not kneel. What of Earth itself? The planet had been badly damaged by the war. Billions of people had died. Cities were ruins. Ecosystems had been destroyed. For decades, the survivors struggled simply to stay alive. But they rebuilt. Slowly, painfully, generation by generation, they rebuilt. 300 years after the war, humanity returned to space. Their ships were small and slow, nothing like the great vessels of the former Dominion. But they flew, they explored, they met the other species of the galaxy. And everywhere they went, they found friends. People who had never seen a human rushed to greet them. Leaders offered alliances and aid without being asked. Children stared at them with wonder, unable to believe they were meeting the legendary species from their history books. Humanity had become something more than a civilization. They had become a symbol, a proof that even the smallest and weakest could stand against tyranny, a reminder that courage was more powerful than weapons. 1,000 years after the war, a young historian named wrote a new book about Earth. Unlike the propaganda of his ancestors, his book told the truth. It examined what had happened, why it had happened, and what it meant. His conclusion was simple. The humans did not defeat us through strength, wrote. They defeated us through will. They showed the galaxy that some things are more important than survival. They taught a universe of slaves that freedom was worth dying for. He ended his book with a passage that became famous across the galaxy. We offered Earth mercy once. We thought we were being kind. We thought we were giving them a chance to live. Instead, we gave them a chance to become immortal. Their bodies are long dead, but their spirits live on in every free being in this galaxy. Every time someone stands against injustice, the humans stand with them. Every time someone refuses to kneel, they honor the memory of Earth. We came to conquer a planet. Instead, we created a legend that will never die. On Earth, life continued. Humans lived and loved and worked and dreamed just as they always had. Most of them did not think much about the war anymore. It was history, something that had happened to their distant ancestors. But every human child still learned the stories. Every human adult still knew the names of the heroes. And every human being, from the moment they could understand, knew the answer they would give if anyone ever demanded they submit. Because some things are more important than survival. Some things are worth dying for. And some things, once spoken, echo through eternity. We do not kneel. We never did. We never will.